We really can't see very well, and so that's fine. Can everybody see here? You might want to stand back just a touch to spread the circle out so people can see. Carly, do you guys want to come down and check this out? Because this will probably be helpful for you for the next exam. So let's make sure everybody has a fairly decent view. Okay, let's go then. So the first thing, this first section here, number 1, 2, and 3, is all talking about the connective tissue that goes around the brain, because the brain is all neural tissue pretty much, except for some vessels and so forth. But the connective tissue, I don't know how far you've got in lecture, but you've got the dura mater, which is the tough part that you can see here. So tough that it kind of looks like it's been plastic wrapped. I can pick it up easily by it. It attaches down. The ethmoid bone sits right under here. The little crista galli pokes up from the top of the ethmoid bone and attaches the dura mater so your brain won't flop around too badly. So this is the dura mater right here. And it's shown here and here. So in some places it divides, and that's where the cerebrospinal fluid can collect through the arachnoid villi. So if we look at this one that's been cut in half here, you can see there's this groove here. So that is the dural sagittal sinus, the sagittal dural sinus, where you can see it's an actual groove. And if the pieces went together, that's where the dura mater is contained. There's a couple of other sinuses too, but that's what that is. The pituitary gland, once you take the dura mater off and peel it, so probably all the brains you have didn't have the pituitary gland, but here it is. And one of the questions in today's lab was about the sphenoid bone, which sits under here and has that little groove at the top of it, the stella turcica, when the pituitary gland was the answer to what sits in there. And so it's right there, not really part of the brain. Well, it kind of is so closely connected to the brain that it kind of is, but it's really an independent whole. So the falx cerebri, the falx cerebrelli, and the tentorium cerebelli. If we look at this picture of an actual human head, a falx means where the connective tissue goes down in between the hemispheres. So in the human brain, this goes really deep. In the sheep's brain, that's about all we have of the falx cerebri but in the human brain, that falx goes deep, all the way, the dura mater comes all the way down to here and really divides the hemispheres. In the cerebellum, a human cerebellum is divided into two hemispheres as well, the part at the back of the brain. The sheep's cerebellum is so rounded that far from having a groove, it doesn't even have hemispheres. So there's no falx cerebelli on the sheep's brain. The tentorium cerebellum is the toughest part of the connective tissue that goes right between these two. Kind of holds the fluid in the fourth ventricle. I actually took it out of here a moment ago, and it was kind of embedded in there, but I took it out partly to see it and partly because I wanted to demonstrate a couple of other things. So that's the one part that actually does go fairly deep in the sheep's brain. So if you imagine that between the hemispheres, that's what our falx cerebri would look like. So then the other two layers, the arachnoid mater is this sort of spidery looking thing, how it got its name. That's to hold cerebrospinal fluid to nourish the outside of the brain here. You can't see it on here because, not only because this has been peeled off, but the preservative just completely dissolves it. But the purpose of that webbing is to create a gap so fluid can flow. And then you can't see the arachnoid villi at all, which are these little valves that let the fluid out. You really can't see those. So arachnoid mater, you really can't see at all. And the pia mater, you can see. It's what gives the brain its shiny surface here, represented by these thin little lines here. So if there was a pin sticking in here and it said, what is the shiny coating on the surface, that would be the pia mater. But you can't really actually kind of see it very well. Okay. So those are connective tissue. Okay, so now we're going to look at some nerves of the brain, or cranial nerves, I should say. So they were within the cranium. So the olfactory. And let's see if we can find, I need the sheep's brain really to point this out. Well, that's not a very good one. Maybe I'll just do them anyway. Maybe I'll just do them anyway. So, because we don't really need the picture if we have the actual brain. So, it'd be this way up. Your nasal cavity is right here. You've got the ethmoid bone in between, your nasal cavity here. So, your sense of smell is coming right up to here. So, these here are your olfactory nerves. So, that's cranial nerve number 1. Those are big enough that I could realistically ask that question. What is this nerve here? And you'd have to identify it as an olfactory nerve for smell. Then we've got and here they are on this one. So for most animals, smell is rather more important than it is for humans. We use our vision and our hearing more than our smell. So sheep has disproportionately large, they got to be able to smell a coyote a long way away and that kind of stuff, so compared to us. So then, and I'm not looking very good for optic nerves. Let me just see if I can dig up something a little better in here. All these brains are cut in two. Maybe I'm just going to have to. Oh, here. Well, so on this one that is covered, there's the optic nerves. They should come out from here and here, but they, and that one likewise. Here you can kind of see a bit of it. I wish I had a better example, but there. If we maybe if we put two of these together with another half brain, got to be the right half. Nope. Oh, what have we here? No. I should have allowed more time to look around for the right stuff that I wanted. Oh, if I put these two together. Okay, the olfactory is a bit smushed there, but there's the optic nerve coming along like that. You can kind of see it encased in the dura mater. They've sort of fallen off on these, but there you can see the optic nerve. The optic nerve crosses over, some of it crosses over and some goes to the same side. So this, where it crosses right here, is the optic chiasma. And then, if you remember that a nerve is outside the central nervous system, a tract is what it gets called when it's inside the nervous system. So starting here, once it's gone through its crossover, these are the optic tracts. So you can kind of see them here and here. So the pin could be stuck in the optic nerve, or the optic chiasma, or the optic tract, and I'll try and get a decent one that has the whole thing going there. So that's why you need to know those three parts for that. The olfactory nerve is nice and easy because it's just the olfactory nerve. We'll come back to a couple of nerves later. We'll let those two rest, and we'll go on to some parts of the brain here. So the cerebrum, or cerebral hemisphere, as we might say, that's the main part of the brain here. In a human, it's even more dominantly large. What does it have in it? Well, if we cut it open, here's the lateral ventricle. So there's two lateral ventricles, if we remember. There's a third ventricle kind of here. That's the one that has the, see if I can see the ventricle pictures. Here. So the lateral ventricles are here. The third ventricle is here, right in the middle, basically, of the diencephalon, between the two halves of the diencephalon. And then the fourth ventricle is way at the back, kind of between the cerebrum and cerebellum. So we've got a lateral ventricle in here. The roof of the lateral ventricle, which probably isn't how a neurologist would want to describe it, but we can call it that. The roof of the lateral ventricle is the corpus callosum. And there it is, and the floor of it is the fornix. So in a human brain, and I forgot to get the human brain model over, but we could look at that another time. The main thing is look at the sheep's brain. I'll get that human model over, and if we have time, and we'll look at that, or we'll do it some other time. Okay, so let's see. Corpus callosum, fornix. The septum pellucidum is the little bit of brain tissue that divides the two lateral ventricles, otherwise it would all be one ventricle. So you can't always see it, but here you can. If we look at this one, see how it's kind of sealed off with a very delicate little part? I'll give you a clue. If I try to stick a pin in there, it's going to break it up, and so that's not going to be on there. But it might say, what is the little piece of tissue that separates the left and right ventricle, in which case then you'd have to say, it's the septum pellucidum. Pellucid means almost transparent. You can kind of see through it a little bit. So then the lateral ventricles, we can see them there. Find the choroid plexus. First of all, what is a choroid plexus? It is the knot of blood capillaries that's in every ventricle and makes the cerebrospinal fluid. So if we dig in here, we should be able to find, dun, 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 dun. Unfortunately, I broke a lot of it up, but there, inside there is the choroid plexus. Here's the choroid plexus of the third ventricle down here. So even the fourth ventricle has one somewhere. So that little guy is the choroid plexus that is busy making the making the cerebrospinal fluid. Or it's being filtered from those capillaries, let's say. Cerebral cortex versus medulla. The gray matter is the cortex, and that's all of this outer part. You can see the inside's more myelinated, so it's white matter. That's the medulla. So, and in the spinal cord, it's kind of reversed. We have the gray matter inside, making the butterfly of the horns, and the white matter around the outside. But in the brain, the gray matter is on the surface. There it is, and that's the gray matter is the cortex. Okay, so cerebellum. Here it is. In the human brain, it's divided into two hemispheres, and in the sheep's brain, it's all kind of one big lump. The arbor vitae is not that important. It's just the pattern of the white matter in the cerebellum supposedly looks like a tree. So arbor vitae means tree of life. Looks a little bit more like a fern, really, but fern of life didn't have the same ring to it, so they went with tree of life, but there it is. So that's all it really is. Cerebellar hemispheres, you can see in the human, not in the sheep's brain. So then we're down to the diencephalon. That's this purple part. And the parts of the diencephalon are the thalamus, the good old hypothalamus, a very important little piece of real estate, and then the epithalamus. So the thalamus is most of it. And so if you look on here, I am going to go get that other brain because I just... Deep cleft down between the cerebral hemispheres. Cerebellar hemispheres, definitely two. We would have a falx down there. Let's look at the vessels, the nerves we've seen so far. Olfactory, not nearly as dominant as they are in the sheep. Here's the optic nerve, optic chiasma there, and then optic tract going off beyond. And here's the little pituitary gland attached here. So, corpus callosum, because these will be on the exam too, so it's good that I got this. Corpus callosum here. The fornix is much, much smaller in the human, and it's really there. They don't color it white for some reason. I think that's meant to be a choroid plexus, but where I wanted to go, where I wanted to get this for, is the diencephalon, this area. You really can't see it very well in the sheep's brain. You can kind of see that it's here, but it's not particularly clear, maybe a little more clear here. This round part is the thalamus. We can see it a lot better here, and the thalamus is kind of dumbbell shaped with a little piece going across. There it is, the intermediate mass as it's called, or as they're calling it here, the interthalamic adhesion. That won't be on there, but that tells us that that's the thalamus. So below the thalamus, hypo means below. So hypothalamus is going to be this sort of anvil-shaped region here. Very, very important for homeostasis, governing our endocrine and all of our organs and everything. So there it is. It's also, the hypothalamus sits right above the pituitary gland. And so here, that's helping to control our endocrine system like that. So you can see much better. If we have a question about the diencephalon, I'll put it on the human brain because you really can't see it on there. So, third ventricle walls, yeah, well, you can't really see it that clearly. Interventricular foramen, we really can't see. Hypothalamus we saw, but really on here, you can kind of see it on here, but not terribly, not convincingly like here. Epithalamus. So the epithalamus is the pineal gland. It's sitting back here, it makes melatonin, and that helps our sleep-wake cycle. It helps us, the sleeping part of our sleep-wake cycle. So when we get off on that because we're jet-lagged, then that's a problem. And can we see it? In fact, maybe even after a time change, we're feeling a little tired. So there it is. That little guy here is, I have to go around the back to see, but that's this little part that's sticking out the back of the diencephalon coming out above the brainstem. And so if I pull it down there, it kind of looks like a little toe that's been squished because your shoes are too tight, or a little tiny pea, but there it is. That's the epithalamus or pineal gland for making the melatonin. And it's represented here by that little tiny knob there. So what I did was pull this apart down here and look through here and see it. Okay. So then we're to the brainstem, and the brainstem is here, and it has the midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. In a human brain, the pons is very bulgy. So it's kind of easy to see the pons, and then you can see the midbrain and medulla oblongata because one's above and one's below. In the sheep's brain, not quite so good, except that the pons literally means a bridge. So this is like a little tiny bridge, not nearly as big as that, but this is the pons here. So that makes this the midbrain area around here. and this the medulla oblongata, and you can see where the brain stops and suddenly becomes a tube. So everything this side here is the spinal cord, and everything here is the medulla oblongata, pons, and midbrain. So, are there any parts to look at? The corpora quadrigemina in the midbrain is, again, we can pull this down and see. So it's actually this back part of the midbrain here. What it does is it controls, if someone lets a firecracker and makes you look or startles you with the sound. So visual and auditory reflexes is what it's for. Because remember, to be conscious thought all occurs in the cerebrum here, in fact in the cerebral cortex. So if it's down in the midbrain or the brainstem anywhere, or the cerebellum, then it's not conscious. So our dear departed friend Rich Espino, who used to teach this class very, very well, I used to call this the baby's butt on the toilet seat. So you can kind of see there's a couple of cheeks, the baby's butt, and the nice big flat toilet seat here. So those are the superior and inferior colliculi of the corpora quadrigemina, which literally means the body of 4 twins. So it's kind of like 2 twins of the cheeks and 2 twins of the seat, and there it is. So I don't know if that'll be on there or not, but there it is. Recognizable if it is, then you just got to remember it's called the corpora quadrigemina. Okay, so then a couple more nerves that we're going to look at. If I could got some examples which have them at all. Yes. Oh, joy. All right. This is the oculomotor nerve. So we had the optic nerve, of which we can actually only see the chiasma on the tract here. That's for seeing, so that's sensory. Oculomotor is, as its name suggests, motor. So most of our eye movement occurs thanks to the oculomotor nerve. Those are really hard to, when you take the dura mater off, or the people who did take the dura mater off, it's quite possible that there is not a good example of those. But there they are, and if I did gonna stick a pin in it, what I would do is stick the pin in and then kind of lift it up like that so that you could see clearly that's what I'm talking about, if that happens to be on there, which I don't know if it will. There's 4 nerves that we could potentially ask that are big enough to pin. The olfactory, the optic with its 3 parts, the oculomotor, and the trigeminal, which is the main sensory nerve of the face. So when you go to the dentist and you have Novocaine, it's the trigeminal you're trying to dull down. So it's huge. You'd think it would stay on there, but it just breaks off so incredibly easily. So, but luckily you can see it in here. So if I was going to put this one on, I would probably, unless I get lucky to get one which has it, or I can peel it off, probably I'm going to put it on inside the dura mater. So here it is. So this massive little number here, yeah, you know how painful it is to get stuck in your eye or jabbed in your tongue or whatever. Those are all coming into sensory, into the sense of the physical senses, somatosensory rather than special senses like hearing, sight, taste, etc. So that's the good old trigeminal nerve. The one thing it does motor, it's your chewing muscles. So it's kind of a mixed nerve, but it's mostly sensory. That's pretty much it. The mammillary bodies we won't worry about. The cerebral aqueduct we won't worry about. The abducens nerve is way too small to see, and I guarantee even if it's on there, I'll change it to something else. And so I think we're good. Any questions? No. Super.